All right, so tonight we're beginning a new series about morality and bioethics. I decided that the first lecture should be about the Seven Noachide Laws, a very important lecture that is actually geared towards all of humanity. Before we begin, I thought that it would be a good idea to ask you, I'm not sure if you know the answer to this question, but if you're an American citizen and you studied American history, you're probably familiar with the Declaration of Independence. And in this Declaration of Independence, the authors actually state the reasons of why they wanted to become independent of British rule. What was so urgent? What didn't they like about Britain? Why did they want to disconnect from British rule? What bothered them? Do you recall? What was not nice about being a British citizen, about being governed by British law? What was not good about it? Well, you don't remember. I'll just briefly tell you that it has to do with something called despotism and tyranny. They suffered. They suffered greatly under British rule. They were not treated fairly. The British government, the king, treated them in a very abusive way, enacted laws that very much limited their freedom. And what did they ask for? What is that all that they aspired for? And for that, look at the Declaration of Independence, and perhaps the most famous words of that document says it all, that the people are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Does that sound familiar now? Do you think these requests are exaggerated? You think it's asking a lot? No. These requests seem to be normal requests, something that everybody would want. Then why was it so difficult for them to have it? Why couldn't they enjoy that liberty? And the answer is very simple. If man is the final judge, if man uses his laws to judge other people, then what he will do will always be what will benefit him, the judge, without any consideration to how these laws will affect his constituents, the citizens. If man is the one that enacts the law, if man is the final arbitrator, the only judge, then he will tend to judge a situation or an individual based on how this benefits himself. He will not always consider the benefit or the welfare of others. So what is necessary in order to avoid these kinds of lack of justice, if we can call it so, abuse of power? We need a universal moral code. And this universal moral code needs to be predicated on the belief of God. A God that we recognize as such that He knows exactly what we are doing. He knows our deeds. He reads our thoughts. A God to whom we are accountable for our actions. If we don't have that in mind, if we don't believe in that, if we don't recognize that supreme power, it will be almost impossible for the human being to overcome his selfishness, his selfish nature, his subjective mind. We're not always objective. So if we don't have a supreme power dictating to us, directing us, showing us the right path, we're going to make many mistakes. If we have to rely on our own judgment, we're not going to always get it right. It is because of that Masoret Israel, the Jewish tradition, is that God, in the very beginning, when He created the world, handed over the Seven Noachide Laws, this universal moral code, to all of humanity. 7 commandments, 7 instructions. And the purpose of that is in order for this world to continue to exist and to function properly according to God's wishes. I said it's the Jewish tradition, but you will not find it clearly in the Torah, in the written word. It is mentioned in the Torah Shebaal Peh, in the oral word. That is where you find mention of this tradition, that God gave the world a universal moral code. It's important to also keep in mind that when we talk about a code, when we talk about laws, 7 Noachide laws, we're not talking about morality or ethics. These are laws. Laws intended to be implemented. Whereas morality, which is very important, which we'll talk about separately, is a system of beliefs or principles of how one needs to conduct himself. It is different than a law. A law needs to be implemented. We need to abide by it. Morality is important, ethics are valuable, and we need to adapt them in our life. They will make definitely a big difference in our life if we apply them. But it's very different than a law. Tonight we're talking about 7 Noachide laws. Laws that need to be implemented if we want society to function properly, if we want to preserve the welfare of people, if we want this world to be a peaceful place. There are certain laws that need to be implemented. When the Torah was given to the Jewish people, in Matan Torah, in Sinai, along with this Torah, with the 613 commandments that we have, we received as well the task or the mission to be a light unto the nations. We will be the ones to teach the 7 Noachide laws, or at least to remind everyone about them, to guide them, with the ultimate goal of bringing them to the recognizing that there is a creator, and reminding them of the importance of observing his laws. So that is our responsibility. It has always been. We did not always carry that out. We did not always go about it, whether it was because we were scattered over many countries in the diaspora, in exile, and not capable of telling others what to do, or simply we were negligent and did not do what we were entrusted to do. If you read Tehillim, if you read Psalms, you will see that David HaMelech also emphasizes this point. Saperu bagoim nifleotav. Recount his glory among the nations. It is clear that this is our responsibility. This is our job, to teach, to enlighten people as to what God wants of us. When one begins to study the laws of God, he is reminded that he is Nezer HaBriah, he is the crown of creation. He is not a monkey, like many want to claim, that our DNA is so close. We're very, very different. We're endowed with a neshama, chelek eloka mima'al. We're endowed with a soul. We're a part of God. We are endowed with free will to act in one way, or God forbid, in another way. In other words, we have choices. So, if we learn the laws, if we understand that God exists, this will definitely have a great impact on how we live our lives. A positive impact. If we do not, then we risk becoming worse than animals. Not the same, even worse. As humanity has shown, as history has shown, the brutality of many human beings, of what they've been capable of doing to other human beings. And you ask, how is that possible? How could this human being be worse than an animal? Apparently he can. If he does not have proper direction, then that's what he succumbs to. He succumbs to certain innate weaknesses that human beings all have. One of them is selfishness. A selfish world view, selfish outlook of that me first, no matter what the price is, at the expense of others. But God wants us to remember that we are different than animals. Very, very different. And that is why he gave us the laws. Not only to preserve the peace, but also to connect with him, to be continuously connected with the Almighty. So let's begin with the mitzvot. There are only 7. And what I will do is give you just a little overview, a brief overview of each one. And in addition to an explanation of the commandment, what branches out, or what additional details can be learned and applied as a result of these, what appear to be simple instructions. There is more information. So let's begin with the first one. The first mitzvah is hakara b'boreh, is to recognize that there is a God and not to worship idols. Recognize that there is a God who created the world, and he's the only one. En od milvado, there's nothing else but him. Haya oveh v'hiyeh, he's always been around. He's an infinite, an eternal God. Today, this concept is known as monotheism, the belief in one God. But just to say monotheism doesn't really tell you too much about this belief. So I added that there's nothing like him, which is explicit in the statement that every Jew says, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that God is one. Not only is he one, he's unique. There's nothing like him. It's not physical. It's something that we cannot describe. There's nothing like him. And he's always been around. He's eternal. This God we cannot replace in any way, in any format, by worshiping other gods, other powers. So this commandment is very significant because, as you know, at certain times in our history, people did worship other gods or other entities for whatever reason. And as a result of that, they got carried away in many ways. Without this strong belief in one God, people begin to act or to behave very, very differently, just because of this one commandment. What branches out from this first commandment? The additional idea that one can pray to this God. He supervises the world. This is additional information that one can learn by delving a little bit deeper into it. Second commandment, that even though we may believe, we have to be also respectful of him. And not to be respectful would be a very, very severe act. Because not being respectful means that at some point in time, God forbid, we may lose that connection. If you don't respect someone, you don't care about them, you look down at them, then you don't really have a connection with them. What's a form of disrespect, of utter disrespect for God that is forbidden? To curse, or as they call it in fancy English, blasphemy. So the second commandment is to be very, very careful, even if you're angry, not to curse. One who complains and curses risks becoming totally disconnected. But not just disconnected. I would like to explain that the severity of this commandment also is because cursing, having this kind of an attitude could easily lead one to deteriorate or to degenerate in his moral conduct. Look at people who use foul language, and you will understand what I mean. It says something about them. One who is careful with how he speaks, what he says, he chooses his words carefully. You know what it says about him? It says that he understands not only the power of words, but he recognizes that this power of speech he has and the animal does not. He's the crown of creation. He can't misuse this power of speech. Chlala, a curse in Hebrew comes from the root khalil, which is also in Arabic and in Farsi, meaning to belittle, to minimize. And that is why this is so serious. You believe, but you curse, then you don't believe. Or you will lose that belief. You will become disconnected. Number 3, since we're talking about respect, as you will see that this is somewhat of a common denominator with the various commandments, the human being is asked to be respectful of creation and of all the creatures that God created. It's all about respect. We respect God. We respect that which He created. So number 3 is respect for human beings, for other human beings, which means don't kill them. So number 3, not to kill. Why? Not only because it's disrespectful, not only because God says so. We just said the human being is special. He's the crown of creation. To destroy a human life is to destroy an entire world. To save a human life is to save a world. The potential of life, you know what one individual can bring about to this world? One. Yes?
Is it to kill or to murder?
We're talking about murder here, to kill.
Murder.
To kill and to murder is the same thing, isn't it?
No, it's different.
What's the difference?
When you go to war, you're killing the enemy.
Well, obviously, we're talking about in a situation where you don't need to kill.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're not talking. This is not war, right? You kill somebody because you don't like him, you're upset at him, or for some other selfish reason. We're not talking about self-defense and so forth. So kavod lanivraim, having respect for humanity, is important because what every human being represents, the value of a human being, which we sometimes underestimate. When we talk about abortion, another week, I'll emphasize this point on how some people did not want to have that baby. And they were almost ready to abort that baby. And at the end, for some reason, they did not. And that baby eventually turned out to be a general. Turned out to be an individual who brought so much happiness to the parents and to the entire country. How should they know? The fetus, a potential of life. To just look down at it as though it's a piece of flesh, a piece of nothing. Human life is very, very special. And when we talk about euthanasia, which will be another topic, we'll also talk a little bit about how even though an individual is already 90 years old, and some people would give up on him, and the doctors would rather not know of him and treat him, nonetheless, even at 90 years old, they can really contribute so much in ways that we don't even realize. And there are many, many stories. So when we talk about that, I'll elaborate a little bit more about that. But it's all about human life. And you can understand why this is one of the commandments. If it were to be left for the human being to decide, Some human beings have already decided that perhaps we should put an age limit until when people should live their lives, after which they should die. Why should they drain the treasury of the country? Why should they be a burden on society? Some people think like that. You see why we need a universal code that is based on faith in God, that is God-given, not man-given? What branches out from this commandment is Ezra Lazulat, helping others. We may not be saving their lives, but we need to help them. We need to be considerate of them. That too is included. Number 4, respect for marriage, for man-woman relationship, to protect its sanctity. Whoever betrays that special relationship is betraying something called love, a very powerful component that unites people, which in some ways corresponds or is similar to the union that we seek with God. The love, the connection that we want to have with Him. Betraying the marriage would therefore be almost tantamount, like betraying God, betraying the whole purpose of life, which is continuity, procreation, and the strong connection between two souls. So there's so much to this commandment that people don't understand. And this is one area that perhaps we need to spend more time on, because it covers many, many areas. Number 4,
It's called adultery.
number 4, therefore, in general terms, is called adultery. Exactly. Arayot. Adultery. Adultery in English, yes. What branches out from this, at least one example of what branches out or is inferred from this, is immoral or deviant behavior of all kinds. And you probably know what I mean by that. There's all kinds of immoral behavior, all kinds of things that people do that are deviant in nature, that are not compatible with what God wants for this world. Number 5, respect for another's possessions. So you know what that one is called? Not to steal. Some people have a problem with this. They say finders keepers, right? They say all kinds of things to justify that something belongs to them. Then you have communism, we're all the same. What's yours is mine, what's mine is yours. They don't believe in privacy. This commandment teaches us to respect the privacy, the possessions of another individual, not to steal, to be honest in our business dealings. What branches out from this is the faith or belief that God provides for everyone. Why be afraid that you won't have, that you won't make it, that you have to steal to survive? People who steal have a very weak connection to God, very weak faith or trust in God, who provides for everyone. Some have it, of course, more difficult than others, but still, it doesn't mean that you need to steal to stay alive. Very, very important law, because this applies all the time in every society, in many, many kinds of situations. As I just said, business is one area where people may be tempted to do things dishonestly, to cheat, to lie. Be respectful of someone else's possessions. Number 6, be respectful of creatures, of animals. We just spoke about human beings, but now we need to speak about God's creatures. They are also created for a purpose. they're also important. We need them. And this law is called Ever Min HaChai. Ever Min HaChai, I guess loosely translated, means eating the limb of an animal while it's still alive. As I've given you an example in the past about some peoples in some countries will open up the skull of a monkey and eat its brains while it's still alive. That's called Ever Min HaChai, taking something from an animal while it's still alive. You know, look around at animals. There are very few that eat other animals alive. As far as I can recall, many of them first kill the animal and then they eat him.
Fish.
But to begin to eat the animal while it's still moving, hyenas do that. There are some animals that for some reason, they don't have the patience to wait and they get to work right away. But Ever Min HaChai is a problem because it brings pain, unnecessary pain to the animal. And I'll tell you soon why I said unnecessary. To cause unnecessary pain to another creature is forbidden. But wait a minute, don't we slaughter animals to eat them? Yes, but that is for a purpose that is allowable. The Torah says it's permissible. But even then, if you learn the rules of slaughter, the Jewish rules of slaughter, you will be amazed how we need to be so careful not to cause unnecessary pain in the process of slaughtering the animal. Because if we did, sometimes, depending on what was done, it would render the animal not kosher. So the Torah is sensitive to tsar balei chaim, not to inflict unnecessary pain on any animal. Some people ask me when I talk about this, well, what about killing mice, rats, roaches, all those pests? Well, obviously, you don't need to live with them. And you can definitely protect yourself. Not only for sanitary reasons, but they can cause damage. Damage to your crops, damage to your home. Some of them can hurt you. So obviously in those kinds of circumstances, you're allowed to eliminate them. But even then, not to be cruel. And number 7. Anybody want to guess what number 7 is? Number 7 is really all-encompassing. It means to set up courts of justice, to protect the law. Here we have laws. Who's going to enforce them? Who's going to make sure that they're implemented, that they're observed? We need a judicial system that is just and not corrupt, of course, that will enforce all kinds of laws, even traffic laws. Even those traffic laws are not part of the Seven Noachide Laws, but that's the intent with number 7. The idea is to establish laws in courts for the welfare of society. There's a lot of laws in business, FDA, to make sure that people do not take advantage of others and give them something which is not healthy. You know, what people are capable of doing for money is incredible. They don't care if others will suffer. There need to be laws that will prosecute them if they do something illegal, something that is harmful. So there's many, many laws. In a normal, civilized society, there are many, many laws. And the whole idea behind them is, of course, to ensure that people live happily, that their liberties are not taken from them, as I mentioned earlier in the Declaration of Independence. So in order to ensure that, you're going to have police, you're going to have judges. Number 7, even though it varies from country to country, is unfortunately not kept very, very well because of corruption. Corruption is unfortunately something that has always been around. Yes. Whether it's at the judicial level, or even at the higher level. Kings, presidents, leaders of their country, congressmen, senators, you think that they're upright, you think that they're doing that which is right, and that they care about you, but unfortunately that's not always the case. They may care more about being reelected than about doing the right thing. Something that is controversial, they may not take a position on it. So it's not to come out pro this or against that. They want to be elected by everyone. So they want to resort to flattery and to all kinds of behavior that is not really worthy of somebody who's educated and who really wants to do the right thing, the correct thing. If you have a good judicial system, hopefully they will take care of any injustice in society. Sometimes they need more manpower, but the goal here is still the same. If there's a will, there's a way. Even if it requires more money, people have to understand the value of this, otherwise you would have anarchy. If society functions properly, then we become partners in creation. We become partners with God in preserving this beautiful world. All right, these are the 7 Noachide laws. Now we've come to a very important additional detail about these laws, which the Rambam elucidates on. Rambam Maimonides says as follows: a non-Jew who observes these 7 Noachide laws will have a share to the world to come. He will be called the righteous amongst the nations on condition that he did so because God commanded. Not that he did it on his own because he likes it, because he understands it and believes in it. He did it only because God commanded him. If he does not observe these commandments because God commanded him, he just observed it because he thought it was a good idea, then he's just mechachameha. He's not from the righteous of the nature. He's a gentleman, a good individual, a smart individual. That's all. And you wonder to yourself, what's the difference between doing something because God commanded versus just doing it because you felt it's the right thing to do? One has the title of being righteous of the nations, and the other one has the title Chachameha. He's a good man. What's the difference here? Yes?
The job then of the Jew is to teach, to know laws, so they'll be
Right, the job of the Jew is to teach. But what difference would it be for the individual whether he does it ultimately because God commanded or he does it on his own because he thinks it's the right thing to do?
So the Jew has to teach him, has to teach the world.
Yes. But why would it make a difference? Ultimately he's doing the right thing. The Rambam says, first of all, if he's the righteous of the nations, he will have a share to the world to come for keeping the 7 Noachide laws. If he does not, then he does not have a share to the world to come. In other words, he has to do it because God commanded. Why? Why should that make a difference? So there are 2 ways of looking at it. One way, perhaps we can borrow from Esav. You remember Esav? Jacob's brother? We have a tradition, and you can clearly see it when you read the Torah, that Esav was a professional, expert in one mitzvah. Which one?
Respecting the
He honored his father and mother. Kibud Avayim, a very, very valuable mitzvah. He was one of the best. He performed very well. Now wait a minute. So I have a question. Esav, who performed this beautiful mitzvah, how come he never became a better person? He never formed a better relationship with God. According to our tradition, the commentators explain that this one mitzvah, this one commandment of honoring your parents, is a springboard to honoring God. If you watch your parents, what they do for you, how much they take care of you, they clothe you, they feed you, how they raised you, and you treat them properly and respectfully, this mitzvah will train you, will help you observe what God has done for you, how He has taken care of you, He has given you life, and come to respect Him too. So you understand what my question is? If Esav is that good at observing this one mitzvah, how come he never advanced? How come he didn't progress to form a better relationship with God and honor God and be respectful of God? Just your parents? How come there's no more? What's the answer? Because he did it not because of God commanding him to respect his parents. He did it because he felt that's the right thing to do. He's my father. She's my mother. I'm a devoted child. Of course I'm going to be responsible and take care of them. He didn't do it because God told him so. When you don't do something because God told you to, it doesn't go too far. You follow me? Doing something because God said gives you the impetus to move forward and do more. There's another, however, explanation. The rabbis tell us, Gadola metzuveh ve'oseh mimi she'eno metzuveh ve'oseh. One who's commanded to do a particular commandment and does so is greater than one who's not commanded and does so anyway. I would think the opposite. Someone who's not commanded, who does a beautiful act, a beautiful deed, should be commended for it. If he's not commanded and he did it anyway, much more than the one who is commanded. But the rabbis tell us no. The one who is commanded has a greater responsibility. He has the yoke on himself. He's being constantly challenged, whether he should do it or not. He's therefore rewarded much more than one who's not commanded, who does not have that responsibility, that duty, the sense of duty. Being constantly aware of our responsibility, of our duty to God, is very significant. It weighs upon us. We're rewarded for that, therefore more than one who doesn't have that. Therefore, one who observes a Noachide law, or the Seven Noachide Laws, and does so because God commanded him, he's always on duty. It's not as easy. He realizes that he's going to be judged. He's going to have to give an accounting before the God when he heads upstairs. He's going to have to give a reckoning. Right? Someone who does not have that mitzvah, someone who does not have that obligation, doesn't feel that way. If he feels good one morning, he'll do it. If he doesn't feel that good, he won't do it. So you see the difference between doing it because God said so. All right, so what do we understand so far? The one who observes the Seven Noachide Laws and does so because God commanded him, he's from the righteous of the nations. Well, what if somebody says, but I want to convert to Judaism and fulfill all 613 commandments, not just 7? What should we say to him?
Probably know what goes.
Obviously, if somebody wants to do it, we tell him, welcome aboard. But we're not going to encourage it. We're not missionaries, because we recognize that every nation, every human being has his tafkid, has his job, his mission on earth. The Jews have a mission, a very, very clear mission that involves 613 instructions. The rest of the world doesn't have to. So why do it if you don't have to? If you do the 7 and you do the 7 properly, then you've done it right. And we wish for all of humanity to fulfill at least these 7. The world would look like a different place. So obviously, if one wants to convert for the real reasons, he feels drawn to it, then he's welcome. We welcome those who truly, sincerely want to observe God's commandments. But it's not because they're converting because they want to marry someone of the Jewish faith. They're doing it for the sole reason of wanting to observe these mitzvot because they believe that it's the right thing to do. They want to be a part of the nation of Israel. Fine, in that case, okay. But we don't encourage it. We actually discourage it. It's not necessary. A non-Jew can be a very good person, an excellent human being, if he observes the Seven Noachide Laws. And he has a share to the world to come. You may have heard that other religions say, if you don't believe like us, you go to hell. You go to Gehenna. You'll never hear that in Judaism. Every human being is created in the image of God. Every human being is special. Every human being has potential. Everyone contributes or can contribute something to the world. We don't look down on anyone, unless, of course, he's evil. That's something else. But a human being who conducts himself properly and does so because God said so, he has a share to the world to come. Even though he wasn't Jewish, it has nothing to do with being Jewish. People always complain, oh, you guys say that you are the chosen nation. That does not mean that we're better. Chosen means chosen for a responsibility. And it's not easy. Not too many who were chosen did a good job. So, is it good? Well, if you do the right things, if you observe the 613 commandments, then of course it's good. You will be rewarded accordingly. But if not, then you're in trouble. Maimonides goes on to explain what the consequences will be for those who do not observe the commandments, the Seven Noachide Laws. And even though he's talking really more about an individual, he really means an entire nation as well. Not observing them has consequences. In the same way that observing them is good and will be rewarded, not observing them can have a tremendous impact on a nation's economy, on the weather, on disease, on all kinds of areas in life. That the Torah tells us pretty much in great detail that certain things happen, certain calamities, and certain natural disasters as a result of not abiding by God's law. So this is already a completely different lecture which we've discussed in the past as to the meaning behind natural disasters. But natural disasters, when you believe in God, you know that these things are not random occurrences. This is a message from God. You're not doing your job right. Society is falling apart morally. And you can see it in the act of nature. You can see it in many ways.
And you say, Rabbi, in Eretz Yisrael, when the Jews left Israel,
yes,
the land was barren. When they came back, now it's fertile.
Yeah, that is a different idea. That is just a sign that Mashiach is coming.
Okay.
That when the land begins to bear fruit one more time, after being barren for so long, it is a sign, a clear sign, that the prophecies that describe the land of Israel being fruitful before Mashiach comes is coming true. So we're living this time. Okay, just to finish up, whoever observes the mitzvot, whoever studies them, will notice that they actually make a lot of sense. It's not something which is difficult for us to comprehend. The human being has a God-given soul, and it is because of this soul that one can comprehend that these things are from God, that these laws are not man-made. They make very good sense to us, and because they make very good sense to us, many, many nations have adopted them. Do you know one country where it is okay to steal? At least in the books, you know. I don't think in the books it says it's okay to steal. What people do is something else. Civilized nations have pretty much accepted this because this is common sense. Our soul, our neshama, understands it, relates to it. Still, it still has to be taught. It still has to be discussed because people forget the importance of them. They forget that it's from God. They forget why it's so important, why it's necessary. Which leads us to another point of people having the wrong attitude about law, about commandments. It limits me. Judaism says Allah does not limit you. It actually brings freedom to you. It brings freedom to you from all your nonsense that you may have in your head, from all the wrong ideas that people develop. The Torah therefore guides us through these laws to make sure that we do the right thing. So is it limiting us or helping us? Rabbis tell us the Torah transforms us to Bnei Chorin, to free men. Without the Torah, we would be slaves of our evil inclination. We would not know right from wrong. Human beings try to teach us what is right and what is wrong, but then it's not always right, and it's not always wrong if it's coming from a human being. But when God teaches us what is right and what is wrong, then we know that it's correct. We need, therefore, the law given to us by God, and not the law given to us by a human being. Where even if it is right at a given time, who says that it will be right tomorrow? Perhaps tomorrow they will amend the Constitution and decide on some other law, because people change. You see why society will not last for long this way if you're always changing the laws arbitrarily based on what human beings want instead of what God wants. Anyway, people have to realize that if they live a purposeful life according to these divine laws, their life will be transformed to a more orderly life, to a happier life, a life of meaning and purpose. Therefore, a life where one feels is that he's not necessarily chained or limited to the laws, but that he is a free man. This is a very important idea, because people really think that if they keep Shabbat or they keep some other commandment, Jewish people, that this will somehow interfere in everything that they would like to do. It will not allow them to go to the beach. It will not allow them to have fun. Wait a minute. Try it out, and you will see that if you follow the commandments, you will feel better. You'll be happier than if you don't. You only think that you're being limited. You only think that it restricts you. You think that it's limiting and it's interfering. But if it's a divine law, if it's God's law, it will not interfere with your life. On the contrary, it will give you the life that you really want for yourself. This is something that not everyone knows, because they don't have that belief in God. So they look at the law as a restriction. When you fulfill a law, therefore, because God commanded so, because it's coming from Him, then you will not only appreciate it, you will definitely want to live by it. And that's exactly what will happen very soon when Mashiach comes. When the whole world will come to this awareness that God is the boss, that God created the world, and that God is the one that gave us these laws. Amen.
Okay.